Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mia Burke, and I am Program Manager with Hanford Challenge. Hanford Challenge is a nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington that focuses on cleanup of the Hanford nuclear site and supports insiders, workers, and whistleblowers who have issues that are not being addressed. This is the 8th webinar of our Nuclear Waste Scholar Series. We started the Nuclear Waste Scholar Series to inspire action and involvement with Hanford cleanup by inviting movers, shakers, and thinkers to share groundbreaking scholarship, art, research, and experience working with nuclear waste. Etsuko's presentation is continuing our artist series, in which we will be hearing from various writers and artists who use different mediums to explore nuclear waste. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Etsuko Ichikawa. Etsuko is a Tokyo-born, US-based multimedia artist, filmmaker, and activist. She received a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree from Tokyo Zokkei University and attended the Tokyo Glass Art Institute in Kanagawa. Etsuko also attended the Pilchuck Glass School in Stanwood, Washington, and worked for Dale Chihuly as a studio assistant for 8 years. Her work has been exhibited internationally in the US, Asia, and Europe. She is currently traveling nomadically around the world, participating in art residencies. Just as a heads up, Etsuko's presentation will be about 45 minutes long, and we will leave time after the presentation for Q&A. If you can't stick around for the whole time, feel free to leave. We will be recording the presentation and we'll share a link of the recording with everyone that registered. Thank you so much for joining us today, Etsuko. I'll pass it to you to talk about your work.
Yeah, thank you, Mia, for the wonderful introduction. And hi, everybody. I don't really see everybody's face, but yeah, hi. And I'm back in Seattle. And actually, my nomadic traveling just finished earlier this month. So I'm enjoying my time in Seattle, meeting friends and spending time during the holidays. So I'm happy to be here to give a presentation today. And let me start it. I'm going to share screen. Okay. Okay. Do you see this okay?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, good. So what I'd like to do today is to, hold on a second. Okay, to talk about my project, in particular, Vitrified, which is related to my experience or is in response to Fukushima nuclear disaster that we experienced in my home country of Japan back in 2011. And also being in Washington, we have Hanford, and that's why I'm here to share this presentation with you, with this particular community. And also I would like to include my recent projects because in order for me to talk about this Vitrified series, I think it's good to share where I am from and how I became an artist, and then why I started making work using uranium. So it's going to be a little bit longer introduction to talk about different work, especially working with glass, which is directly related to vitrified process. So, and then, but I will focus on my presentation with the series Vitrified. So introduction and project, and I would really like to get questions and answer section set aside for 10-15 minutes. So please ask me questions at the end or put in the chat. So I was born in this beautiful country, Japan, and Mount Fuji, cherry blossom, and this is a view in Kyoto. It's just amazing that how this nature offers in the country and the culture and history. And Zen Garden, this is a Kyoto Ryoanji Temple. And something about this culture is really deeply embedded in me. And this is a wonderful forest, the bamboo forest outside of Kyoto in Saga area. And this is the town that I grew up. I was born and grew up called Nakano. in Tokyo. And it looks so dense and, I was born right in the middle of cosmopolitan city, and the largest station is next station called Shinjuku. And I always tell my friend in Seattle, the station of Shinjuku size is about the downtown Seattle. Imagine how big that is. And then upground, there are like 9 stories, trains goes by all the time. And then underground, another 9 or 10 different levels. Then this is a picture I always use in my slideshow because my mother pointed out, I was probably like 4 years old, kindergarten student, and the classroom activity was to draw a flower of a cosmos flower. And then there are like, I don't know, 50 drawings like that on the wall. And my mother came pick me up and saying like, Etsuko, look at your drawing. Yours is very unique because it's not a typical like 5-petal, flower or sunflower, something you can imagine as a flower has a stereotype image, but you really actually looked at the flower and observed and then, drew from what you saw. So that really, was the starting point that I remember that I think I'm very creative somehow. And I appreciate so much that my mother pointed out at the early stage of my life. So I just loved making things from childhood. So I went straight to the art school, learned all the basics, drawing, painting. This is my high school time work. And then I went to university to do a very conceptual work. And I was so eager to learn about contemporary art, growing up in a, culturally deeply rooted in historical and traditional art in Japan. I was really more interested in contemporary art. Then those 2 images I show is floating clouds and also water. Those are something very important to me, that not this particular images, but what represents here is the ephemeral things that we have in nature. Clouds, I love taking a seat on the plane by the window side and just looking down the clouds, moving, and the shadow of the clouds over clouds, or I can just do that all day. And that's like a best time that I have, really. I don't really need any entertainment video on the plane. I just watch the video, watch the window, seeing the clouds. And same as water. Something really amazing about water, or air or rain, it's just always changing the state, ephemeral. But I feel it's something very ephemeral as well in our lives, and our body is made out of water, 75%, and it's so connected to the earth. So I always go back there in my daily life as well as my artistic practice. And when I was a college student, about 20 years old, maybe, I feel like I started my artist practice really early, from, I say, 5 years old or 6 years old. I was always thinking about making something, creating, showing, and sharing all the time from age, I don't know, 5, 6 to 20. And I think I totally burned out at some point during the college time. And then I just kind of paused. And then this is not the particular tree I saw in the college campus, but I remember this huge, beautiful tree, light coming through, the sunlight coming through the leaves, and then having this beautiful shaft of light, and then a shadow reflected on the ground, and then moving and changing. And I felt like I'm just like this tiny little creature on the earth. And then I felt, I was very naive as well as an artist to be. I thought I'm just totally useless and worthless as a person to create something. So I'm sort of black and white, either go for 200% in or 0%. So I decided to quit everything and then didn't make anything for 4 or 5 years after that. So my graduate thesis was actually a writing. It was a poem instead of a visual work. Then, long story short, I was working for a company, always in the art field, like a theater or design or glass related. And I had this health checkup, and the result came out really strange, that my blood cell was red and white was completely off. And then, of course, that's something you are not supposed to do. You look up all the research and see what kind of sickness I have. And then I felt that that could be a very serious health condition I have, and I might die. And then I actually needed to go to university hospital for 3 times to do the blood test. And then none of the results showed anything. But although the result from the first test was completely off and something very critical, but I was healthy after all. But I needed to wait for this result to come out after 3 times of blood test, about a month. And then I just had this as a kind of like a wake up call from somewhere above me. And I really felt like hit my head, I was like shocked, like, what are you doing? You're supposed to make things, and why you're not doing it? I just heard that. So I started doing all sorts of things I wanted to do in my life, as if I would die tomorrow. And I went to bookstore and I opened a book, and the first page I opened was a glass blowing summer session, intensive session on a small island called Noto. So I was like, wow, I have to go do this. So I applied and I went straight forward that summer. And then the first time I blew glass, gathering glass on the pipe, about, I don't know, 2.5 feet, 3 feet long metal pipe you gather into the furnace, which has a molten glass. It's like a viscosity, looks like a honey and golden and shining. And then you gather, and the first time I gathered, I had this like goosebumps all over my body. And then that was it. So I was like, I want to work with glass. So I went to study glass in Tokyo. And then that brought me to Pilchuck. That was a reason that came to Seattle and the United States back in 1992, about 30 years ago already. And I never left. And this is my blowing glass, old blurred slide or photo scanned into slide, digital. And then this was the first night at Pilchuck. Dripping molten glass onto huge ice block. And again, I was so attracted to this molten state of glass at that point already, rather than creating objects or functional pieces. And I wanted to imitate how fluid the glass is to create sculpture. So this is one of my really early pieces. And then I'm gonna move on to project. And then the first few projects, I talk about my glass related projects. And the glass pyrography, which is started at Pilchuck by accident. I dripped the glass, hot glass that made a beautiful mark on the concrete. So that I'm calling this like a happy accident, because I didn't intend. That was sort of like a mistake you do in the studio. But that happens all the time in a glass studio. But at that point, it registered me in a very different way. And I just like kind of shocked and almost like had an enlightenment that, wow, this is such a beautiful material to draw. So I started drawing with hot glass. And this shows really well that the process of drawing with glass as a drawing tool, it's almost like a calligraphy. So this is how I draw with the glass. And then the result could be all sorts of different images. And this is the image that I made with blowing glass and then imprinting it. So it's sort of like a circular burn mark. And then this is more like a drawing type. And this is like imprinting it. I sculpt piece in the optic mode. So the glass come out with sculpted and I kind of roll it onto the paper. And I also do larger installations. This is probably most seen in my work in the past 10, 15 years. It was exhibited at the Bellevue Arts Museum in Bellevue, Washington, at the entrance foyer for about 10, I don't know, close to 15 years. And then the process of making became more, people are interested in seeing the process. So I offered to do performance, and that became a part of my work later on. So this was choreographed with a dancer for the Museum of Glass in Tacoma, Washington. That was for the annual fundraising event. And then the second project is called Walk with Mist. That was at the Bellevue Arts Museum, part of the solo show back in 2008. And then I go back to this like a light or water or reflection, shadow, those kind of elements that really inspire me. And then this was during the trip in Mexico, found the cenote and was able to go inside and float on this beautiful calm water and look up. There's a little hole above you, and it's like a jungle, all the things hanging down. And then I thought that this is such a beautiful scene, so I wanted to recreate that with my art. This is a drawing. And my image was that the glass as a fire walking on the surface of water. And this is how I created blown glass, sandblasted, and then a video projection onto the glass balls. This is a final project outcome. I wanted to create like a cave look-like space with the light from the back side, like a candlelight. And these glass pieces are hanging and the video projection on them. This is the underneath. Next project is called Nachi. This is the probably most complicated installation I have made, and also inspired by waterfall, the water. This is one of the sacred sites in Japan, and there's a story about Jimmu Emperor, who is the first emperor of Japan about 2,000 years ago or so, found something, saw something shining, like sparkling, shining on the land of Japan when he was approaching on the boat. And then he went there and found this beautiful waterfall. It's about 400 feet, 350 feet high drop of the waterfall, and enshrined it. And I visited there and thought about this place being enshrined for thousands of years and people coming to pray. And I wonder what they would say or pray. It would be probably happiness, the health, longevity, or wealth. And I thought that this people's wish probably haven't changed so much during this time. And then when I look at the water, it's splashing continuously and ephemeral and changing. So I thought this combination of being ephemeral, water, and then prayer being more eternal as a human being or nature, I wanted to combine that to create the show. This is a drawing. And I wanted to create this sacred geometry, spiral, golden ratio, all we have in nature in my work. And this is the outcome. So it's a spiral going up, and then hanging thing is a cotton rope. And there's a video projection and an audio piece included in the center of the circle swirl. And then 6 pyrograph pieces hanging. And the shadow and light played an important role in this work. As people walk through and go inside of the installation, the rope moves, and then the video projection and the shadow moves. This is the center of the piece where the sound installation is located. I recorded a dripping sound based on a Japanese ornament called suikinkutsu, which is often seen at the tea garden. Then I would like to move on to the second section of my lecture. Fukushima nuclear disaster happened on March 11th, 2011. And I was in Seattle, and I was really shocked to see that event through TV screen. And I had no idea what was going on first. The first image that I saw was a video and somebody on a helicopter reporting, but he couldn't speak because he just couldn't keep talking. It was just devastating. And I thought that this was a movie first. I couldn't realize that was real until 5-10 minutes. And I thought that was live. That was just happening then. And then, of course, I called my parents. They were living in Nagano Prefecture at that point. So it's not that close from Fukushima. But I couldn't reach them for 4 or 5 days because all the phone line was down, and they didn't have cell phones. So it's a landline. So finally, I was able to find that my parents are fine through my cousin who texted me. It took me 4 days. And then that was just like a pivotal experience in my whole life. And even before, just a basic fundamental idea of who you are, what you do, what is your goal, what's your life, what's peace, and all those questions came to me because of this event. I needed to question every single thing, and I re-evaluate who I am and what I do. So it took me about 3 whole years to reflect this experience, really slow process. I remember going to studio every day as a full-time artist, but I couldn't make anything for a while. I was just in shock. And I thought that, again, kind of back to when I was 20 years old, question myself as an artist and a human being, am I worth to make something? And then that question came back to me. And I couldn't just go back and make the same work I was doing for the past 10, 15 years since I moved to Seattle. And so I paused again for a few months, and I really wanted to create work in response to Fukushima nuclear disaster. And this is the Eco at Sasop project. And my friend, audio, like a sound artist, said that I was, one of those conversations I have with other artists, like, what are you working on these days? And I said, I'm really interested in echo, like wavelengths, or how the information is transferred, or how the people's vibe communicate with other people, or water, like a ripple effect on water and so on. And he said, why don't you go to Satsop? You would see this amazing echo chamber in a cooling tower. So I did. And then because this is a nuclear related site, I was anxious and I felt kind of depressed. But I feel like I need to go there by myself alone. So which I did. And as soon as you go into this property, it's Satsop Business Park, they called, and they have 2 reactors and 2 cooling towers, but never functioned, never completed. So the fuel, none of the fuel was installed in there. So it's supposed to be safe to go in. And that is back in 1970s, late, maybe many of you probably know this history much better than I do. And so I went to this one of the cooling tower, Tower 2, which is mostly completed, 95% completion. And as soon as I got inside, all those feeling I carried into the space was completely gone, because the space was, I felt more like a cathedral, and I felt really ephemeral and ethereal. I felt it's a spiritual place. And I was so amazed how my feeling shifted right there within the cooling tower, considering why this was made for, and then thinking about the Fukushima, the people who got affected and victims of nuclear bombings of Japan. So I was very surprised, but I feel like I have to come back here to create work for, as my prayer for, especially for people for Fukushima. So that was the trailer, so 1-minute version of the film. I would really love everyone to go to my Vimeo site to watch the whole thing. It's only about 5 minutes, but yeah, it was just amazing experience being there and with a small group of crew to document this amazing sound, as well as sort of like an act of prayer I did within a space. And this is the catwalk level of the Satsop nuclear tower, cooling tower. Some still shots I will share. And then this is the ornament called shishiodoshi. I wanted to bring traditional Japanese sound ornaments, or the things that would make impact sound. So this is one of them. That's a kan sound that you hear in the video. These are other elements, objects that I brought for making sounds within the space. And then also I dripped water with using bamboo stem from the top of the tower. Water often used in the many different culture for cleanse and purification. That was my intention. And we had so much fun filming this, so many challenges. I can't tell you enough how hard it was to document this film, but it was so much fun. Hanging the video and a microphone right in the middle of the cooling tower to capture the best echo sound. And 7 channels and 12 recorders. And then I visited Hanford in 2014. Of course, I know the electricity we have is coming from there, but knowing the Fukushima disaster, so as the Manhattan project that located within Hanford property, I feel very awkward that being Japanese and then being living in Washington State, and all those complicated things that you have to deal with in the life. And I really wanted to visit and see what was there. So had a tour and to see the inside of Manhattan project. This is the wall showing the plutonium tubing to be stored, to be produced. And then, yeah, it was just so awkward as in Japanese, and then hearing stories about how this was produced. And the nuclear bombing. This particular plutonium was used for the bombs for Nagasaki. And then by the end of the tour, I received this small piece of glass. The scientist came to me and talked about a few things because I had so many questions about the vitrification process. And he said, you can take this home. This is the piece broke off from the furnace. When they melt glass material, it looks like lava and it looked like glass. Then I just so excited about this whole thing that I felt like my working with glass. And then I wanted to do more about my work in response to nuclear disaster. We came together because of this vitrified glass piece that I received. And then I started working on the vitrified glass series. Then I wanted to go back to my origin as Japanese, and this is the Jomon pottery. And the Jomon era is the longest era that we have on the earth, I believe, and started from 10,000 years BC to 300 AC. Such a long time that they had, this is a hunter-gatherer era. They didn't make rice yet. And then this is a typical design that they kept making for over 1,000 years with clay. And it is believed that they use for prayer, for ritual, rather than cooking something like, nuts or cooking grain, not grain yet, some kind of like pine nuts or something that they are cooking inside. So I made a replica of one of those very well-known Jomon pottery piece. This is a wax making process to make mold to cast glass. And I cast 100% uranium glass into the mold to create this piece. So I wanted to talk about what we are leaving for future. And we still find even in my parents' neighborhood in Nagano that they dig some land and then they still find Jomon pottery shards. So it's there and it's really close to us as Japanese, and the history is very near us. But I just wanted to question, if I bury this piece to somewhere and then somebody might find 1,000 years later, and what do they find and why and what this is? So yeah, so that's the piece. And I also made replicas of those beautiful shards. Again, clay making. And these are the results. Cast glass with uranium, a little bit in it, but more like an earthstone. And I also wanted to make this figurine, combine two different figurine. This is called dogu, also from Jomon era, the same time. This is about 5,000 years old, considered to be. And I made a hybrid piece and carved clay and made a wax. It's a long process. I'm not going to go into it to explain it, but it's a long process of making the form with wax, and I make mold and then a cast glass. This time I use blue glass, but contains uranium. It's from Czech Republic, the supplier from glass supplier from Czech Republic. And when you use UV light, that glows like this because it's radioactive. This is called water within. And I cast a cube. This is 4 inch by 4 inch by 4 inch, casting hot molten glass into metal carbon mold, and then adding a splash of uranium with other colors, sort of like a blue tone. And the theme of this piece is that this is the same volume of glass converted to, or the same amount of the water within my body converted to the volume to the glass. That's what I made as cube. So the total amount is the same amount of water I have in my body. So it's like representing my body, the water, might have some uranium. I'm drinking water from the Washington, the river, or anything, And then I was kind of inspired by this color, using color in my work. So I went back to my glass pyrograph, which was monotone for a long time, but added water colors. And then this is a uranium spheres I kept making. Like, I don't know how many I made, 200, 300 of those over 3-4 years. And again, this is, to me, it's also water and the earth and inside of each person. This is like an individual person to me. It's directly connected to the earth and nature. And this is how I make each piece, adding colors like a swirl and adding uranium glass as a glass supplies. I can explain a little bit more about the technical part at the Q&A possibly. So this green part is the uranium part, and others are blue and the clear that I use different colors.
水、すべての始まり、そしてすべての終わり。生まれ、育まれ、そして死んでゆく。私は子供を産まなかったから。100万年経っても消えないものを作ってしまった。100万年。そうしたらもう息をしなくていいから。楽になるね。それは子供に受け継がれ、面々と引き継がれる。
I show a few still shots from the film. This was filmed at the whole rainforest in Olympic Peninsula. And this is close to Nia Bay. And I picked the location because that was the closest point across the Pacific Ocean to Japan. And this person would release this nuclear or vitrified sphere into the ocean from that point. And this is my last set of slides, Broken Poems of Fireflies. And this is the most recent project I did for the museum solo exhibit. And again, back to my origin, Japan, beautiful rice field in the mountainside of Nagano. And the terrace, it's just amazingly green and beautiful. And there's a ceremony called Mushi Okuri at the different part of Japan, but where especially has this terrace of the rice field. And what it means is to send insects. And what happened is that before becoming the rice to be harvested much earlier in the stage, that people pray for bad insects to go away. But the fireflies are so beautiful during the summer, so please stay. And they have this village people gather and have this bonfire, walk through the terrace of rice field, and then make prayer, play drums, and sing. I thought that this is such a beautiful ritual and really deeply connected to my culture, rice and harvesting and Thanksgiving and beautiful hot summer I really miss. So I created this pulsating uranium glass spheres, sort of like imitating fireflies in a beautiful rice field. I remember seeing them when I was a child. My parents always took me to countryside every summer and every winter in Nagano. And it's such a beautiful thing that fireflies fly and can disappear, and they only live for a short time. And so I made about 100 pieces of uranium glass balls and lay out on the platform, and then had dimmer. So they are programmed in 7 different cycles. So it goes fade in and out gradually differently. And then this was expanded exhibit that has 2 galleries. One is dedicated to this installation with glass orbs. And the other one on your left, you see, is a video projection. So the curator there selected 3 works from my past 4 films that I created. Vitrified that you just saw, and Echo at Satsop, and then Radiating Echoes, which is another video that I made working with the students at the School of Blind, asking about what is beautiful to you. This is a close-up shots of the uranium spheres installation. So each one has life, each one uniquely created. And I think I always feel like this is a person to me, like each one is a living creature. And this is still shots from the video film projection site of the gallery. And then you can go to my website to see other works, also a video tab. You can go through, I think I have 17 videos at Vimeo, and then maybe 5 or 6 videos uploaded on my website.